The purpose of this video is to zone in on basically what can be done in DeltaV with regards to DeltaV Operate and essentially SQL Server, right? So I want to kind of cover an example use case where what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have DeltaV Operate where essentially from the Wi-Fi system that I showed previously, where essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an in-process check to make sure that from a LIMS system that basically a sample has been taken and that the sample is good enough and it's basically that it's recent enough for the Wi-Fi system, for the Wi-Fi loop to continue to distribute, right? And essentially what I've done is a simpler example where basically I'll just kind of play around with the I'll play around with a tiny, simple select query just in order to get the concept across. And basically, then what I'll do is I'll make sure that I have a VBA open and I kind of explain things a little bit technically. Okay, so here on a separate machine to the one that's actually running DeltaV, I have a SQL Server open and I have a small table here which kind of which is done kind of like as a small tiny backend table for a LIMS system, right? And what we would have in our heads is that basically at a Wi-Fi return point, so that would be say around here, for example, that essentially that manual samples are taken by someone from a lab role, and essentially what they're looking for is conductivity. They want it to be low, they want the TOC to be low, and then they want the bioburden, the colonies, etc., to be down as low as possible, right? And you essentially want to see a released kind of appear here, right? And obviously then what you want is the sample kind of date and time, right? So essentially it's kind of the way that this has been done, right, is that in the background of DeltaV Operate, but it's say in other application, or sorry, other kind of SCADAs and so on, like iFix, you'll have Visual Basic for applications, and reaching out over the network is quite a nice kind of function to have, right? So essentially you want to be often these additions are made as a result of kappas and so on, and then essentially you might have a procedural modification that's made where a procedure is updated, you know what I mean, to basically click the button and confirm that something is good or whichever, right? So say for example what I have here, and I'm going to click the LIMS IPC check. There's a click that's done. We see sample status released, sample taken. That's the actual time, and then we can see an expiry. How long have we got left? Right, and that's there. And then the bottom line is that the Wi-Fi is actually acceptable. So if I go and take a look at the SQL Server, here's what I'll see. I'll see basically that it's been done 3 times, but what we're looking at basically is the top item that's essentially here, and I'll dive kind of into the query basically in the end. So for anyone who's used say for example for anyone that's used kind of Visual Basic for applications, probably the most common one is basically Microsoft Excel, right? So there's an awful lot of Microsoft Excel examples that are out there, and basically the same environment is kind of in the background here, right? So say just in order to get a kind of a live example, which is kind of easy to kind of to see here, say what I'll do is I have sample ID, and then basically I have the TOC value, and live on the form I might say for example go to, and I'll just select number 1, give them a click, and then basically what you'll see is there's 210, and then maybe say for example I'll go to number 3 and the value should be 237. So live, then I'll go to number 3 and you see it's 237. Okay, so basically what I'm showing there is kind of like that live example of an interaction where there's a query actually behind the button. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive directly into that now. One thing I want to point out is that SQL queries with regards to DeltaV are heavily focused on DeltaV Operate in the background. I've tried as much as I possibly can, say for example, to go in the background into some form of a control module or whichever, And unfortunately, what I can say is that in the background, in say, for example, in Control Studio, there is no way to process SQL queries. It's an unfortunate thing, but it essentially just means that there is external solutions. Of one actually I've actually developed, which is kind of OPC UA tags to SQL queries, but I'll show that basically at another time. Okay, so effectively, I've given kind of the live example there where the actual data can come back to DeltaV Operate. What I'll do quickly is I'm going to jump into DeltaV Operate configure. I'm going to open the form and I'm going to basically show the query how it can actually kind of work essentially in the background. So I will go and open the picture as soon as it's opened. There, I'm going to open up the guide that I had open, the screen. And essentially what I'll do is I'll dive in here first, and what I'll do is I'll go to edit script, and essentially there in the background here in terms of how queries are done, there's nothing magical here for anyone again who's done VBA with Microsoft Excel. Essentially what I've done is I've declared a variable at the top, and that's basically it. There is a text box that's up on top. It's done like a standard kind of Windows Forms object. Then I have a standard kind of button that's there, and then I have a standard label. So when I go back to the Visual Basic Code, what I do is I just have a connection, and then basically I have this guy called a record set, which holds the actual query, the result that basically comes back. Then I have an actual query that I can put together here. Here it's just simply select the TOC from the actual name of the table where sample ID, and that's it. So the sample ID was being changed from 1 to 2 to 3. The actual TOC parts per billion were, if I go back to I actually closed them down. I closed down SQL Server. It doesn't really matter. But essentially, the query was as simple as this. And then essentially what I did was I changed the label itself, the actual value of the label, to the actual return that kind of came from there. So it's extremely useful, in my opinion, to use VBA in the background. But certainly when it comes down to SQL queries, where you have an external system that's there, the best option, in my opinion, is to go down this road if you don't want to have a third-party application. The way around it, if you want to run queries that happen in an automatic way, and you don't have some kind of middleware MES system, basically the best thing to do is to monitor an actual tag, kind of like an OPC tag, and then effectively to take actions based upon that. But this is certainly still very, very useful as a quick way to add additional checks into your process as per procedure. And you can put kind of, audit trail links and so on behind these kinds of buttons, which is very, very good to have. Thank you very much.